Hello viewers! Today I want to talk about the nuts and bolts of restoring an old car. Now, if you're like me, when you've taken apart your old car and you're left with a pile of rusty old fasteners, you can't bring yourself to just put those back in as they are. You gotta do something. Everything that's going back together is gonna be all clean and repainted and brand new, so it just doesn't feel right to put those rusty old fasteners back in. But what do you do if there's no good replacements available? I'm working on a kind of obscure old European car, which makes things harder to replace. It's a '73 Opel Manta, if you've been following my suspension rebuild series. So I'm left with all these random pieces of hardware that I had to figure out what to do with. So that's what this video is about. And I'm going to talk through some tips on how to keep track of everything and organize it as it comes off so you don't lose any of those nuts and bolts that are unique and important. And also some options for DIY restoration. But finally, in the end, why I decided to send my stuff away to get professionally zinc plated. In the end, I thought that was the best option for me, but I'll let you decide what route to go, present some options, and let's figure it out together. So to start with, as you're taking things apart, it's really important to keep track of and organize all your fasteners so you don't lose anything and you remember how they go back together. And there's so many little details, like what kind of washers to use, how many, which side of the part they go on, because sometimes there's washers on either side or just one side. There's a lot to it. So in this age of smartphones, it's easy to take tons of pictures. So take pictures as you take things apart, document which way the bolts go in through the part, and you can lay the fasteners out next to the part, showing their orientation. And then it's a great idea to take notes and measurements, which you can do on your phone a lot of times. I use an iPhone, and you can use markup to actually write on the picture and take a bunch of measurements of the nuts and bolts. I was pretty meticulous as I took my suspension apart. I took a lot of pictures and made lots of notes, measured everything, and it might be a little bit of overkill, but I'm glad I did, because now I have a really clear idea of what everything is, and if there's any confusion of what goes where, I've got documentation for all of it. You should never assume you're going to remember where things go or how they go, because what tends to happen with projects is you're really enthusiastic up front, you're getting stuff done, but then you kind of get stagnant and months can go by, and by then probably going to forget some stuff. So just when in doubt, document everything. So as you're cataloging your nuts and bolts and fasteners, it's really handy to have a way to measure them. This is just a inexpensive measuring device that I got online. This is a metric version. You can also get a SAE version, Imperial, whatever you want to call it. But all you do with this is you take your bolt and you can find out the important things about it. So first of all, diameter, it's not that one. There we go. It's an M14. How long is it? You just line it up at this edge. 25 millimeters long. And then what's the thread pitch? You have all these little gauges here. So I already have found out that this one is a 2.0. So it's a very handy way to keep track of what the sizes are on your fasteners. So if anything gets lost, you can replace it. There are certain fasteners that you should replace no matter what. Obviously, if anything's super corroded or the bolt heads are really beat up or rounded off, then yeah, you want to replace them. But also things like lock nuts and lock washers, they're not necessarily one-time use, but they work best the first time, and then from there they start to wear out the more you put them on and off. And they're designed to hold torque and maintain, that constant torque value. So it's a good idea to replace those. It's also important if you're getting replacements to match the hardness of the bolts. So let's say you're keeping the bolt, but you're getting a new lock nut for it. So you want to take a look at the head of the bolt, and it should either say 8.8 or 10.9. Those are probably the most common grades. The grade 8 is a pretty standard grade, plenty strong for most applications. But if you're seeing those grade 10 bolts on your car, there's usually a reason that the engineers chose those higher hardness bolts for that spot. So if you're replacing stuff, it's probably a good idea to stick with the same strength of bolts that were in that spot. So keep an eye on the heads, and it's also a good idea to match the nut to the bolt in terms of the hardness. So if you have a grade 8 bolt, get a grade 8 nut. You don't want them to eat into each other if they're different hardnesses. I want to give a quick shout out to Bellmetric. They're a great website, not sponsored or anything, but I went on there and they had a great selection of metric fasteners in multiple finishes, so I could get yellow zinc to match my replated hardware. And everything came in beautifully organized baggies and, you know, great service. Highly recommend if you're looking for metric fasteners, bellmetric.com. So, if you're someone who likes doing things themselves, which I am, I like fixing things up and cleaning them up myself, it's satisfying. Here are some of the ways you can fix up your hardware yourself. First of all, you'll need to strip off the rust and old finishes, so something like a wire wheel can actually be great. I did spend a bunch of time wire wheeling off most of my fasteners, and the wire wheel is great for digging into the threads and all the tight places for the most part. You can also get a vibrating abrasive tumbler. That's a great way. You can just dump all your stuff in there and turn it on and walk away from it for several hours and come back later and everything should be pristine. I don't have one, so I wasn't able to try that, but it looks like a really good method for cleaning up your metal bolts and hardware, and especially the little things like clips and screws and springs that you can't really do with a wire wheel. Something like a tumbler is a great option for that. So once you get them all clean and bare metal and shiny, you need to do something to refinish them. And this is where it gets tricky, because unlike a lot of other car parts that you can just paint, you can't really get away with just painting bolts. I mean, there's been times when I've been lazy and just painted the head of the bolt that shows just to make it look nicer. But you can't really paint the threads because it's all gonna rub off when you screw it in, and it's gonna become hard to screw in because the paint adds so much thickness that it all gums up, and it's gonna flake off the head of the bolt when you're putting your socket on it. So it's not really a very good option to paint your bolts. So I started looking into other options that you can do at home. One of the easiest ones you can do that looks nice and is fairly professional result is black oxide. You can get a kit of the solution for around 30 bucks, and it's basically a conversion coating that converts the top surface of the metal into oxide. It's like a type of rust, except black. And then you seal it in with oil. Problem with black oxide is it just doesn't hold up as well as actual plating. It looks nice for a while, but if it's outside in the environment with any moisture, it's gonna corrode, it's gonna rust again. And it's a little deceiving because a lot of brand new fasteners come in black oxide and they look great, but if you keep an eye on them, they don't last as long as zinc plated fasteners. So then I started going down the rabbit hole of do-it-yourself electroplating at home, and you can do it. You can get a whole zinc plating kit, but you need to basically set up an entire laboratory with like 10 different buckets and immersion heaters and pumps and a sophisticated power supply that you can adjust, and I don't have space for that. I don't want to spend several $100s to get set up to zinc plate things at home when it's probably the only time I'm going to use it. So it just wasn't practical for me to set up a whole at-home plating system. Not to mention, you kind of have to do things one at a time for the most part, so for a decent sized batch of hardware like I had, it would just take forever. Not worth it. So in my case, I had a whole bunch of parts that are unique and irreplaceable, have to reuse them, and no good way to restore them at home. So ultimately I decided to bite the bullet and gather all my things together, as well as some extra parts just because, and send them away to get professionally plated. But yeah, it was a fun day when I got my box of stuff back and got to do an unboxing and look at everything. Good news! I just got all my stuff back from the plating company. Oh yeah. Pretty cool. Check that out. That's pretty cool. That's pretty sweet. What is this? This is fun. This is like a full-on Christmas morning experience. Ah. Well, that turned out nice. That's the little heat shield that goes on the And the support brackets, that's cool. That looks great. I did these clamps. You might think, why would you even bother doing clamps? But these are cool. They're original off the car. See that little Opel symbol on them? These ones actually, I don't think I could find replacements for. I checked around a bit. These are sort of unique. Bushing sleeves. Yay! Ooh, shiny. Oh, farted. I decided to go with yellow zinc, partly because the yellow looks cool. It's like a really nice golden color, but also the gold chromate is an extra layer that kind of protects the zinc layer. So it's actually better corrosion protection than just zinc. So in the end, even though it was somewhat expensive to get my stuff all replated, I'm glad I did. It was a good experience and the stuff came out awesome. And I obviously know that all these fasteners fit the car because they're the ones that came off. They're the correct original fasteners. There's something really cool about being able to reuse the original ones instead of buying generic new fasteners. Curious to hear your thoughts. Would you have done this, or would you have tried to do it yourself? Or do you have some experience restoring your fasteners? Curious to hear what you guys have done. Anyways, hope this was helpful. And now that these are all beautiful and ready to go back on, I can start putting my car back together. So stay tuned for the rest of my Opel suspension saga. But otherwise, thanks for stopping by. Like and subscribe. See you later.